Let's talk UGA recruiting. The Dogs, they beat Auburn 31-13 on Saturday, but they actually beat Auburn twice. We're going to talk about it and how they pulled that off with Jeremy Johnson of Dogs HQ. Also, some other high priority targets on campus. But before we get into it all, Georgia fans, do me a favor right now. Jump on board and hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We love talking Dogs recruiting. We're going to do it all season long. So jump on board and hit subscribe. All right, let's bring on Jeremy Johnson of Dogs HQ. Jeremy, let's just talk Usman Chroma, the number 5 running back in America, picks Georgia over Auburn right before kickoff. And for much of the cycle, Usman Chroma was trending really to anybody but Georgia. It was FSU at points. It was Auburn at points. But what did Georgia do? Or did they just kind of put the pedal to the metal on his recruitment? Like, what did Georgia do to turn that one in their favor?
I mean, that's the best way I can describe it, is they put the pedal to the metal. Josh Crawford coming over in, I want to say it was January when he got hired, but Josh Crawford taking over and evaluating that running back group. He kind of circled Usman Chroma as his guy, and he got the blessing from Kirby Smart to go get him. That was the message, and that's what he did. I mean, he had a great relationship with Usmani, and it paid off on Saturday. I think this wasn't something that happened within the last 3 weeks. I think this summer is when things really started to turn for Georgia in Georgia's favor. I start hearing buzz that, hey, Georgia's a little more in this, and I think people are saying. I think Crawford was at the head of it. I can't stress it enough that I think he was the one who helped, win this over for Georgia in the long run.
Yeah, and Chroma was actually supposed to announce that decision last Saturday, but hey, it worked out. He ended up delaying it a week, and it worked out great for the Dogs. They get 2 wins on Saturday over Auburn. Speaking of that game, you had a great article of recruit observations that you put out on Dogs HQ Sunday morning, and one of the things that you pointed out in there is that there was a couple safeties on campus that Georgia's circling back on. Lagonza Shady Hayward, Eric Winters, who's committed to Auburn, Hayward committed to Tennessee, and then Anquan Fagans, who's also committed to Auburn. What did you make one of these safeties being on campus? Does it tell you that Georgia really wants to land another one? And what did you think about these flip targets? Who stood out to you?
Yeah, I definitely think, the position has kind of come back into the forefront a little bit just because of Rashad Johnson's decommitment, and it'll flip to Texas A&M a few weeks back. And I think they're kind of trying to gauge the interest of some of these guys that they've had great relationships with. And, another guy that we didn't mention was Rashawn Dinkins, who is a Georgia Tech commit that wasn't able to make the game, but he was invited as well. So, having those guys in the crosshairs that tells me that, hey, yeah, like I said, this is a big priority moving forward. Lagonza Hayward is one that really stands out to me. He's a very physical player. He's a monster athlete. I know that T-Rob spent a little time with him before the game. Travaris Robinson, the co-defense coordinator, defensive backs coach of Georgia, he spent a lot of time with him pregame. They have a really good relationship. Robinson offered Lagonza Hayward when he's at Alabama, and he was one of the key pieces for Georgia even getting involved in the first place. So the fact that there's still some friendship, some fun times there to be had. They were laughing and joking and having a really good time before the game, and that kind of relationship is something that you have to pause at, because this is a guy that is committed to Tennessee, but then he also has this really good relationship with Georgia's defensive backs coach and co-defensive coordinator. So he's the one that stands out the most to me. Obviously, Eric Winters has been to Georgia a ton. I know he's committed to Auburn, and I know that Georgia has been communicating with him as well. I was able to confirm that with him this morning. So he's one to watch as well, but I kind of feel like that's going to be a tough battle. Obviously, you mentioned Anquan Fagans. I feel the same way about him. I'm sure there's some communication. Coach Robinson coached his brother for a while at Alabama, and then Dante Williams also coached his brother at USC. So there's a lot of closeness there as well. But, the other guy is Rashawn Dinkins, a guy who I expect to be on campus at some point, that, is also a part of this equation. So they have the options, and there are a couple guys that are on the board that are realistic options at this point.
Yeah, I think Laganza Shady Hayward probably stands out the most to me because I feel like when he made his decision, that was the most heads-up battle that Georgia had. I mean, not to say that they didn't offer and were entertaining Winters and Fagans, but I felt like Hayward chose Tennessee directly over Georgia, and now that it's circle back season, the Hayward showing up on campus kind of stood out to me. All right.
Yeah.
A couple other big names on campus. I mean, of course, we could talk 5-star plus Justice Terry, but he's trending so heavily to the Dogs that there's really not much question involved in that one, at least right now. But the one intriguing name that did hit me was wide receiver C.J. Wiley. He was back in Athens. Now, he's committed to FSU, was in Tallahassee a couple weeks ago, but there was rumors swirling, and Steve Wiltfong was always confident that Wiley would make it to Athens. Of course, he shows up. So how do you feel right now about Wiley and Georgia? Because at the time of his decision, I think a lot of people were shocked that it was Florida State. I don't think as many people would have been shocked if it was LSU, and I think Georgia was maybe the favorite at the time of his decision. But, of course, it's FSU is where he committed to a couple months ago. But now, how do you feel about Georgia?
I mean, I feel a little better today than I did yesterday. I mean, I really feel like Florida State has a lot of, they have a real stranglehold there. And I really feel like, it's going to take some huge effort from Georgia to get in there and take him from Florida State, because that's what it would be. It would be Georgia taking C.J. Wiley from Florida State because he's entrenched there. I really think he likes what Florida State has going. But getting him on campus is huge because he's another one that has great relationships with their staff. It's been a long-standing relationship. They've been recruiting him since his freshman year of high school, so he knows all of those guys. And just seeing him yesterday, getting to see him he's a very stoic guy, and he doesn't laugh and giggle and play. Like, he's really usually business. He's all business most of the time. I got to see him crack a few smiles yesterday, and that to me that's not nothing, because if you can make C.J. Wiley laugh, that means he really likes you. So that was the thing that I took away from it, is that getting him on campus and getting that in-person time is invaluable in that recruitment. But obviously there's a long way to go. There's a couple months, and Georgia's definitely in it. They're still communicating. He's listening. He's listening to a couple schools. I know Notre Dame offered recently, and that's also a school that could have some interest. But he's locked in right now. But that could change over the next 2 months, and I feel like Georgia's in the best position of anyone to be the one that capitalizes if something should happen.
It reminds me of the KJ Bolden recruitment, because at the time, KJ Bolden also made a summer decision. And at the time, there's two other teams that people thought he was going to pick, either Georgia or Auburn. He picks Florida State. A couple months later, he flips to Georgia. CJ Wiley, kind of a very similar vibe to that one. But like you said, there is a very good connection between FSU and Wiley. So we just got to follow the visits, see what happens down the road. But CJ Wiley in Athens, I don't think it was nothing, put it that way. All right, another big name. The last big name I want to talk about was offensive tackle Jackson Cantwell. And we know Georgia likes these big old offensive linemen, and he's at 2026, not just any 2026, the number one offensive lineman in the 26 class. And his recruitment's heating up because he's been taking some visits this fall. Where do you think Georgia stands early on with Jackson Cantwell?
I definitely think they're in that top group. I mean, I don't know. I've never been to Missouri, but I know it's not an easy flight from Atlanta or wherever. That's a long trip for him to keep making, and he's made that trip, I want to say 3 times now this year. So the fact that he keeps coming back to Georgia, as you say, follow the visits. That is the key here, is that he keeps coming back. Every time we talk to him about Georgia, it's something positive, and it's something different every time. He's actually analyzing what Georgia is to him, and I think that's big. And there's a lot of communication. I mean, Georgia talks to him every other day. He got to meet with Kirby Smart yesterday, and he's a 2026 offensive lineman. So that's also, that tells you what they think of him. And you start looking at Georgia's depth chart. I mean, they look good at tackle right now. You got Xavier Truss, and you got Monroe Freeland, who plays a lot, and you got Bo Hewley, and John Jackson. All those guys are still on campus, but 2 years from now, you're gonna start looking for guys to replace those people. And where do you go? And now you start looking at Jackson Cantrell. If he's able to get in there and go to Georgia, hey, we got an elite guy to come in here and replace some of these guys. So I think he's a high priority for Georgia. I think Georgia's in it. I think Georgia is right there with Missouri and some of these other schools that we talk about a lot. So I think this weekend was really good on that front with him. Just the fact that he just was there. I mean, getting him on campus is always huge.
Yeah. All right. Well, we just scratched the surface. Dogs HQ has a ton of info coming out of this busy visit weekend. Jeremy Johnson, appreciate you taking a little time to talk some Georgia recruiting with us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.